I think most of us, if we're being really honest with ourselves, live with this kind of secret suspicion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that we might be achieving success, checking all the boxes that society gives us. You get the title, the salary, the perfect family photo for social media.
Right. The highlight reel.
The highlight reel, exactly.
Yeah.
But internally, we are just running on fumes. We're constantly confusing this unrelenting pressure and just sheer exhaustion for actual achievement. And we are, I think, fundamentally trapped in this cycle of just barely enduring life. It's survival mode disguised as success.
That is the absolutely necessary distinction, and it's really the core realization driving this entire body of work we're diving into today. We confuse survival, the desperate, primal need to just keep going, to avoid collapse.
Yeah, just treading water.
Just treading water. We confuse that with thriving, which is the act of actively, creatively, and authentically engaging with your life, even when it's messy and complicated.
So this deep dive is based on a guide to thriving. And what's so powerful about the source material is that it doesn't just offer philosophy. It really gives us a true, comprehensive roadmap.
It's a framework.
It's a 9-element framework that helps us analyze exactly where we get stuck and, maybe more importantly, how we can reclaim our personal agency over our own internal state.
Our mission today is to really thoroughly explore this architecture. We're going to break down these 9 interconnected elements that shape our experience and look at the very practical tool that helps us navigate them in real time.
This is the AIR method.
The AIR method: awareness, inquiry, and reframing. And I want to stress, this is not, some theoretical self-help idea. It's a systematic way to map your internal world and then choose where you want to live on that whole survival to thriving spectrum.
Okay, so let's quickly establish that core visual framework because it really does provide the structure for everything we're about to discuss. At the very center, the sort of central operating system, we have beliefs.
Beliefs. That's the foundation. That's what shapes everything else.
Everything.
Precisely. And then surrounding beliefs, we find the 4 core components of our immediate internal and embodied experience.
Right.
And those are thoughts, emotions, sensations, and actions, and then transcendence. These are really the areas where we can exert daily influence.
And then spanning the whole structure, sort of wrapping around all of these internal elements, we have the dimensions of time and space.
Which is our context.
Our context, exactly. So that's our past, present, future, and then the largest context, space itself, which, that encompasses our physical environment, our culture, our systems.
Everything outside of our skin.
It's a truly holistic model. And it reminds us that there are no isolated issues. Everything is deeply, deeply connected.
It's all connected.
So let's start with the author's background, John Rosenberg, because I think it gives such powerful context here. This framework isn't just academic. It feels like it was forged in a lifetime of confronting and trying to overcome just immense inherited adversity.
It absolutely is. His personal history is it's defined by profound multi-generational loss. He's a descendant of Holocaust survivors. His grandparents lost their entire families.
Wow.
So that instilled this early sort of inherited sense of vigilance and the essential, the necessity of survival.
And the tragedies didn't stop there, did they?
Not at all. His maternal grandmother tragically perished in the Pan Am Flight 217 crash back in 1968. Then later, his father died while performing this incredible act of courage.
Right, he was shielding his niece.
He was shielding his 7-month-old niece during a fall, and he saved her life, but lost his own.
I can't even imagine the weight of that.
And the disruption just kept coming. Just 2 years after that, his business partner was murdered during an armed robbery. This forced the author to flee Venezuela and seek refuge in Canada.
So he was carrying this just incredibly heavy inheritance of survival, of displacement, of loss. And that became the lens through which he saw the world.
It had to. And that pattern of survival continued to define him, even as he achieved what, the world considers major success. He talks about 2 major personal crises that ultimately forced him to pivot away from merely enduring life toward actively shaping it.
The first one involved his best friend, right?
Yes, watching his best friend Nathan battle stage TIV liver cancer. In his final 4 months, Nathan, who was this man previously known for his immense kindness and generosity, he just built these walls around himself.
He closed off.
Completely. He sank into hopelessness and disconnected from the world. And the author witnessed firsthand how that raw, desperate fight for survival, without a framework for thriving, could eclipse even the deepest human connection.
That is such a powerful and painful lesson that even in the final fight, the internal mechanisms of survival can actually sabotage your connection to the very things that give life meaning.
It's the ultimate paradox, isn't it? And then, just 2 months after Nathan's passing, the author's wife, Adriana, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
So it was just one thing after another.
One thing after another. Suddenly, he was confronted with this intense, long-term helplessness and uncertainty right there in his own home. And these events just cemented his resolve. Even in a crisis, life has to be experienced as more than just a battle you have to endure.
But the actual trigger for the change, the big pivot, it came from realizing the hollowness of his own ambition. He landed his dream job, COO of a rapidly growing tech startup.
Had all the status, the power, the wealth that comes with it.
All of it. Yet, less than a year in, the success just felt completely empty.
He had successfully climbed the mountain that society had told him to climb, only to find the view was just deeply, deeply unsatisfactory.
He called it climbing the wrong mountain.
Exactly. The fear of losing the status and the wealth he'd achieved was crippling, but the fear of staying was worse. So he walked away from that whole identity, realizing he was sprinting on a treadmill made of ambition and approval and fear.
And that pivot led him back to graduate school and ultimately to the creation of this very comprehensive framework.
It did.
So let's nail down what he means by survival mode in a modern, non-physical context. We all know the primal urge, the nervous system response designed for the saber-toothed tiger.
Right, and that primal response is automatic. It's designed to sacrifice all nuance for speed. Get away now, think later. The challenge today is what you could call an evolutionary mismatch.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, that ancient circuitry is now being misapplied to purely psychological or professional or social threats. You get an abrupt email from your boss asking for an ASAP meeting, and your brain reacts with the same visceral fear as if a physical predator was lurking in the bushes.
And this state, it manifests systemically. We're talking about chronic physical tension, right? Hyper-alertness, feeling constantly on.
And the insidious negativity bias. This is critical to survival mode. Our brains are hardwired to fixate on the threatening or the negative.
Because missing a threat, like the tiger, is historically way more costly than missing an opportunity, like a berry patch.
Exactly. So you could receive dozens of pieces of positive feedback, but your brain will zero in on that one critical comment, or even an imagined criticism, and just amplify its importance, completely ignoring all the positive data. Survival mode narrows your focus and amplifies your reactivity.
It creates a kind of tunnel vision. The author gives a really insightful anecdote about this from early in his career as a buyer for Sears.
Oh, the pit bull buyer persona.
Yes.
He developed this aggressive persona. He was fueled by intense ambition and a desperate need for approval, which translated into this combative negotiation style.
He was making these bold, sometimes totally unrealistic demands on suppliers.
And he thought this style projected strength, that it would earn him respect and success.
But the internal cost was just massive.
It was huge. Being stuck in that defensive, aggressive survival mode actually narrowed his options. He alienated potential partners. It amplified his emotional responses, leading him to act long before he had a chance to reflect.
So that constant drive for external validation and this aggressive posturing, it ultimately constricted his world.
It was a strategy for a short-term win, maybe, but it was a long-term loss of influence and, more importantly, peace.
Okay, so now let's flip the coin. Let's define thriving mode with that same specificity. What does that experience actually feel like?
Thriving is a state of dynamic engagement and intentionality. It feels like being grounded and present even when external circumstances are really difficult.
Well, it's not about being happy all the time.
Not at all. It's about operating with creativity and curiosity instead of reactivity and defense. And crucially, you experience the full emotional spectrum. Sadness, anxiety, joy, without any single emotion completely overwhelming you or pushing you out of balance.
And we know there's a biological basis for this shift, which is what makes it so compelling.
Oh, absolutely. Thriving intentionally activates the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center. This is the area responsible for planning, reflection, ethical decision-making, complex problem-solving.
All the higher order thinking.
All of it. And this part of the brain is essentially throttled back in survival mode because the amygdala has hijacked the system, prioritizing immediate reactive action.
So when we engage the PFC, we're capable of navigating life with much greater intention and flexibility.
And nuance. And the author shows that thriving isn't about the absence of challenge. It's about how you engage with the challenge. He illustrates this so beautifully with his simple Friday night cooking ritual.
Right, even with all the stress of his wife's MS diagnosis and his high-pressure work life.
Exactly. The ritual itself, making boeuf bourguignon or, just chopping vegetables for calamari, it becomes a form of active presence and flow. The rhythmic process forces him into a state where the world just slows down. It pulls him away from rumination.
So it's a thriving moment that can coexist with adversity.
It has to. It's like how Alexander Fleming's simple curiosity about some mold on a petri dish led to penicillin. Thriving uses challenges as creative opportunities.
So if thriving is the direction we want to head, the means of travel is acquiring agency. What is agency in this context?
Agency is the core shift from feeling like a victim to feeling like the author of your own life. It's reclaiming influence over our future by recognizing that we always have a choice in how we respond.
In survival mode, we feel trapped. Options seem limited. Control diminishes.
Right. But thriving is about recognizing that even amidst crushing external uncertainty, a diagnosis, a market crash, we retain the capacity to influence our future by focusing on what we can actually control.
Which, following Stoic principles is primarily our attention, our effort, and our judgment. But that sounds so easy when you just say it. The real challenge is actually implementing that choice when all the alarm bells are ringing in your head.
And that is precisely why the framework provides the mechanism for applying that agency, the 8R framework. It's the practical intervention that interrupts that automated survival loop.
Okay, let's break down those 3 steps. Let's really linger on them because they feel like the hinge upon which the rest of this deep dive rests.
Okay. Awareness is the critical first step. It requires pausing, maybe even physically stopping what you're doing, and asking 3 key questions.
What are they?
What mode am I in right now? Am I operating from fear or from intention? And is this state truly necessary? You have to ask, am I physically safe in this moment? Without that pause, we just remain slaves to these reactive, inherited patterns.
Okay, so after awareness, you have inquiry. This is where we bring in curiosity, right? And maybe some skepticism to our own internal reactions.
Exactly. Inquiry asks, what belief or perception or assumption is driving this visceral reaction I'm having? What's the story I'm telling myself that might not be 100% true? What old pattern, maybe from childhood or the inherited survival script, is playing out here? What else might be true?
So you're destabilizing the conditioned response by questioning its very premise.
We're shining a light on it.
Yeah.
And finally, you get to reframing. This is the intentional action step.
This is where you choose.
This is where you choose the direction. You ask, what can I do differently, even just slightly differently, right now to move myself toward thriving? What choice would reflect who I'm becoming, the person I want to be, not just the person I've been?
So ARR is this constant practice of surfacing the unconscious, creating that space, and then choosing an intentional path forward.
That's the work.
Okay, let's start with that central foundational element, beliefs. The material stresses that are beliefs, the explicit rules and the invisible scripts that are running in the background, they aren't just opinions. They are the fundamental architecture of our reality.
They literally construct the world we experience. Beliefs are complex patterns. They combine thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations, and they act as these powerful filters.
So if we believe the world is inherently dangerous and unfair,
then your attention automatically locks onto threats, which just confirms that narrative for you over and over again. If you believe the world is, say, abundant and manageable, your sense of possibility just expands.
And the scientific evidence for this mind-body connection is, it's just astounding. We're not talking about just positive thinking here, are we?
Not at all. We're talking about actual, measurable physiological changes driven by belief. The power of the placebo effect is the most immediate example.
Right.
Patients are given a biologically inert substance, a sugar pill, instead of painkiller. And they still experience measurable relief. Why? Because their brain releases its own powerful natural opioids.
So the belief in the medicine influenced a profound physiological response that literally altered their experience of reality.
Yes. But the milkshake study really hammers this point home, that our perceived reality can actually override objective nutritional facts.
This study is incredible. Walk us through it.
Okay, so in this study, participants drank identical high-calorie shakes. But one group was told it was an indulgent, decadent, high-calorie shake. The other group was told it was a sensible, low-calorie health option.
Even though they were the exact same shake.
The exact same shake. And the group who believed they were consuming the indulgent, high-calorie shake showed a dramatically sharper drop in ghrelin.
Which is the hormone that signals hunger to our brain.
Right.
Wait, So let me get this straight. The body responded not to the actual caloric intake, but to the belief about the caloric intake.
Absolutely. The belief about satisfaction and indulgence caused a measurable hormonal change. This is, it's the ultimate evidence that the architecture of our beliefs physically alters our metabolism, our perception of satiety, our whole hormonal environment.
It proves that the operating system of belief is deeply integrated into our physical being.
It is. And this influence extends to massive societal shifts, too.
Yeah.
Think about the multi-decade obsession with low-fat diet.
Oh, that's a perfect example of a collective, powerful belief structure that turned out to be really destructive.
Totally. For decades, the collective belief was that fat was the enemy. This drove manufacturers to compensate for lost flavor by loading products with sugar.
And it took a mountain of research to counter that belief.
A mountain. It shows that collective beliefs, the foundational scripts of a culture, can be rewritten, but it's a slow process, and it requires undeniable evidence and new ways of seeing.
And this brings us straight to the growth mindset paradigm shift, which applies this whole idea to our core self-perception.
Carol Dweck's research at Stanford just fundamentally challenged the old fixed intelligence model. She showed that students who believed their abilities and intelligence could improve with focused effort. The growth mindset.
They consistently outperformed their peers.
Consistently. They outperformed peers who believed intelligence was just a fixed trait you were born with. This work proved, at scale, that the core belief you hold about your own potential can be rewritten, and that it directly determines your capacity for resilience and achievement.
It sounds so necessary, but we all know that changing these core beliefs is brutally hard. We have these really strong internal resistance mechanisms, starting with something called belief perseverance.
Belief perseverance is basically just cognitive friction. It's the inherent human tendency to cling stubbornly to our initial beliefs, even when we're faced with overwhelming contradictory evidence.
We see this all the time in arguments over ideology or politics.
All the time. Rather than admitting a belief is inaccurate, people will double down, often claiming the counter-evidence itself is flawed. It's really an act of self-defense for the ego.
And Lahia and Keegan's concept of immunity to change is even more insidious, isn't it? Because it's a self-protective resistance that unconsciously shields us from the discomfort of growth.
And it often sabotages our own publicly stated goals. It's the ultimate self-sabotage loop.
So you might say you want to delegate more at work.
Right. But the underlying invisible belief is, if I don't do this perfectly myself, I will fail and my worth will diminish. The unconscious desire to protect that core belief is what keeps you overworked and miserable.
And neurologically, the brain reinforces this.
It does. The prefrontal cortex can rationally support updating our beliefs. But the amygdala, our emotional alarm center, it imbues those core beliefs with immense emotional weight.
So when a core belief, say, I am a reliable person, is challenged, the amygdala fires, and it turns that challenge into a perceived threat to your very identity.
Exactly. Challenging deeply held political, religious, or self-identity beliefs triggers a full-on survival mode response. That's why those arguments escalate so quickly. It feels like someone is questioning who you fundamentally are, not just what you think.
And then the need to belong is woven into all of this, forcing conformity.
Beliefs serve as a powerful social glue. Aligning with your group's beliefs created cohesion and cooperation, which historically enhanced survival. So if belonging is conditional on maintaining certain beliefs,
like the work ethic of your firm or the political stance of your friend group.
Right. Challenging those beliefs feels like risking your psychological and social safety.
That's why I really appreciate the analogy of the divergent ants.
Neil Thies's analogy just perfectly captures this tension. Most ants conform. They follow the established trails, they prioritize safety in numbers. But the colony's long-term survival actually depends on the divergent ants.
The explorers.
The explorers who stray from the path, risking danger to find new resources. Human societies need this balance. We need the willingness to challenge the status quo, like those pioneering ants. It risks alienation, but it's essential for growth.
And the consequence of sacrificing our internal truth for that external alignment is inauthenticity.
This is the slow self-erasure. If we suppress our natural inclinations, like the child who stops drawing imaginative dragons to draw real things just to get parental approval, we're editing ourselves to fit expectations.
And that chronic inauthenticity, it creates long-term suffering. It leads to a hollow identity, even when we achieve that outward success. Which brings us to Emily's problem.
Yes, Emily.
Let's look at Emily. She was a high-powered professional who deeply believed her worth was tied entirely to continuous perfection and achievement.
She was physically and emotionally exhausted, just constantly on this hamster wheel of proving her worth. The idea of not achieving was a profound psychological threat to her.
So her awareness began only when her coach prompted her to question that rude assumption.
The coach asked her, "What would happen if you stopped believing your worth depended on your success?" And that question was initially terrifying to her.
But the terror was the signal. It meant they had hit a central protected belief. So what did the inquiry reveal?
Well, the inquiry traced the belief all the way back to her early childhood, where praise was always contingent on achievement or performance. She started questioning the source of the belief. Why should her intrinsic value be measured by others' fluctuating approval or by completing a task?
That's a powerful question.
A very powerful question. And the reframing brought powerful, agentic action.
So she didn't just think differently.
No, she intentionally adopted a new grounding mantra. My worth is inherent and unchanging. But the shift wasn't just cognitive, it had to be behavioral. She practiced setting real boundaries, leaving work consistently by 7 p.m., even if a task wasn't perfectly finished. She started practicing delegation.
She was testing the belief that everything would collapse if she wasn't perfect.
She was running the experiment. And the result was so counterintuitive for her. Her growing authenticity actually made her a more effective, trusting leader, and eventually led to a promotion because she was no longer operating from a place of fear and control.
So the change started with a single difficult shift in her core identity.
She moved from someone who was constantly proving her worth to someone who recognized her worth was inherent. That internal security completely transformed her external interactions. It created those ripples in the pond for her team and for her family.
Okay, moving on to element 2, thoughts. So if beliefs are the architecture, thoughts are the raw, unedited, often chaotic construction material, the really liberating concept here is that we are not our thoughts.
That realization is the absolute first step toward reclaiming any agency here. Thoughts are nothing more than fleeting electrochemical signals. They're just transient brain states.
It's the mind's attempt to quickly narrate and make sense of reality.
Right. They're not immutable laws or objective truth.
And there are thousands of them. Neuroscientists estimate over 6,000 thoughts a day, often flowing in what they call thought worms, these trails of neural activity connecting one thought to the next in rapid succession.
And because the brain's primary mandate is survival, not subjective happiness, it's wired to prioritize taking shortcuts and leaning toward the negative.
This is the negativity bias in action again. The brain interprets ambiguity as a threat, and it's constantly searching for proof that the world is unsafe.
And this often leads to a process called confabulation. It's where the brain creates these cohesive but often distorted narratives from incomplete or inaccurate information. It just fills in the blanks with assumptions that often keep us stuck in a threat state.
Let's look at Simon, the case study here. He was paralyzed by thoughts of inadequacy. You're falling behind, you'll never catch up.
He was so consumed by that internal doom loop that it was robbing him of presence, particularly with his young son.
His mind was just manufacturing these stories. A colleague's momentary pause in a conversation was interpreted as disapproval.
A routine client revision became confirmation of his incompetence. These confabulations just amplified his stress, fueling this continuous state of impending doom. He fell into these cycles of over-preparation and self-doubt, which just cemented his survival mode.
He was proving to himself over and over that he couldn't trust his own capabilities.
Exactly.
So let's drill down into common cognitive distortions, or thinking traps, that fuel this unreliable narrator, starting with catastrophizing.
Catastrophizing is where every challenge, no matter how minor, is immediately inflated into a full-blown crisis.
So Simon's brain, getting a curt client email that just reads, "We need to talk," it instantly leaped too.
I'm getting fired, I'll lose the house, my family will leave me. It bypasses any rational assessment entirely and sidelines the prefrontal cortex, leaving the body in a state of hyperarousal.
Okay, the second trap is all or nothing thinking, or what the author calls the tyranny of perfection.
This is reducing all complexity to these binary extremes. It's either a success or a total failure, a masterpiece or total garbage. There's no in between.
The author even admits he struggled with this when he was getting manuscript revisions.
Yes, he initially feared he wasn't cut out for this, rather than just seeing revisions as a necessary, normal step in the creative process. For Simon, if he spotted one minor flaw in a project, he couldn't acknowledge the comprehensive success of the entire thing. It just robbed him of any joy or confidence.
And the third, the really insidious one, mind reading.
Assuming we know what other people are thinking or feeling, and often just projecting our own insecurities onto them, studies show people are remarkably bad at accurately guessing others' emotions.
We get it right only about 20% of the time, right?
Something like that, yeah. Yet we maintain this immense confidence in our wrong guesses. Simon would interpret a neutral facial expression as judgment, which would then fuel hours of completely unnecessary internal stress.
And the final trap here is confirmation bias.
This is the filtering mechanism. Simon would dismiss compliments as just people being polite, internalizing them as worthless, yet he would fixate entirely on minor critiques as proof that he was, in fact, an imposter.
So his brain only registered the data points that reinforced his existing insecurity. It's like an echo chamber of self-doubt.
A perfect echo chamber.
So how do you break free from a cycle that is actively reinforced by your own nervous system and your own cognitive biases?
The way out lies in establishing agency in the space between the stimulus and the reaction. This powerful concept comes from Viktor Frankl's experience in the concentration camps.
Right.
Between the external horror, which was the stimulus, and his internal reaction, he found that space to choose meaning, whether it was by recalling his wife's face or offering a compassionate word to a fellow prisoner.
We face, much less extreme circumstances, but the principle is exactly the same. That infinitesimal moment of pause is where we can unlock our agency.
And applying AR to Simon was all about that. The awareness was gaining recognition of the specific reactive thoughts, being able to say, okay, that's mind reading, that's catastrophizing.
Just labeling it.
Just labeling it. Then the inquiry asked, what evidence do I actually have for this thought? What is truly needed right now? More stress or simple action?
And his reframing action was so powerful in its simplicity.
He had to make these small, almost defiant choices to break the perfection loop. Instead of tweaking a line in a presentation for the 10th time, he'd just close his laptop, say internally, good enough, and intentionally go seek presence with his son.
So he moved from paralyzing doubt to guided agency.
And that meant his interactions with his team became less defensive and more open, which demonstrates that rewriting these internal narratives has this contagious ripple effect on everyone around us.
Moving to element 3, emotions, the compass within. We're often taught to treat our emotions as these obstacles to rational thought, but this framework says they are vital messengers, constructed by the brain to make sense of the world.
The understanding of emotions has really undergone a revolution. We used to rely on these old models with just 6 basic emotions, but research now points to a far more extensive spectrum, up to 27 distinct emotional states.
And crucially, Lisa Feldman-Barrett's research shows that emotions are constructed by the brain using several inputs.
Yes.
Constructed based on what criteria exactly?
So they're constructed based on physical sensations, the immediate context you're in, your memory, and your cultural norms. All of that gets synthesized to generate a meaningful emotional experience.
So the same physiological response, like a quickened heart rate and rapid breath, can be interpreted as either intense fear or intense excitement.
Exactly. It depends entirely on the framing and the context that we apply to that physical sensation.
This sounds almost philosophical, but it has a very clear biological timetable, right? This is where that 90-second rule comes in.
Yes. The researcher Jill Bolt-Taylor found that the chemical cascade of a pure neurological emotion, that initial visceral spike, rises and falls in about 90 seconds.
Only 90 seconds.
About 90 seconds. After that point, any lingering distress is not the emotion itself, it's the thoughts we attach to it. The rumination, the looping narration, the replaying of the event, the self-judgment.
Okay, wait. If the biological event of anger or sadness only lasts 90 seconds, why do I spend 3 days angry after a fight? That rule sounds a little too simplistic for real life.
That's the critical point. It is simplistic if you don't account for the next step. The thought loop. The 90-second clock restarts every single time you replay the incident, every time you reinforce the belief that you were wrong, every time you catastrophize the outcome.
So the emotion is real, but the sustainment of the distress is generated by the thoughts you keep attaching to that initial messenger.
Precisely. And if the emotion starts in the body, we have to tune into that raw data first. We have to ask, what is my body trying to tell me right now?
Absolutely. Emotions manifest as physical sensations first. The knot in the stomach for dread, the clenched jaw for suppressed rage, the heavy chest for grief. They are the signals that the brain uses to organize meaning.
And the complexity is just amplified by our cultural rules about expression.
Culture dictates which emotions are permitted.
Totally. Western culture tends to accept joy and pride, linking them to personal success. but it often suppresses vulnerability, sadness, and especially anger.
And the suppression leads to things like secondary emotions, right?
Yes, like converting raw anger into a more socially acceptable feeling like guilt or shame, or instrumental emotions where we might express sadness dramatically to elicit sympathy or influence someone else's behavior.
The cost of that suppression is huge, both psychologically and physically.
Chronic emotional suppression just disrupts the brain's ability to construct coherent emotional responses. It leads to dysregulation and locks us into chronic survival mode.
And physically.
Physically, the toll includes chronically elevated blood pressure, disrupted sleep, a weakened immune system, and lingering physical tension that often manifests as chronic pain. The body literally holds on to the unexpressed feelings.
The author's personal story about his father's death just so powerfully illustrates how suppressed grief can manifest as overwhelming rage.
He recounts being unable to cry after the loss, just essentially suppressing the grief deep, deep down. And then later, during a tense legal battle with his uncle, that unprocessed grief surfaced as this blinding, overwhelming rage.
He described trembling hands, blurred vision.
The sheer physiological force of the fury. Because there was no safe space for him to process the grief, his survival system manifested the underlying pain as explosive anger.
And this leads us to Deanne, the case study, who mastered emotional suppression as a high-achieving attorney and mother.
Deanne had internalized the belief that emotions were a problem to be managed and controlled. She was the absolute picture of composure, until her suppressed feelings began to manifest as this destructive strain in her most valued relationships.
It reinforces that idea that hurt people hurt people.
Her emotional control was keeping her small and disconnected.
So the goal isn't control, but emotional agency, the ability to actively engage with the emotion rather than being controlled by it.
And that starts with the recognition that no one can make you feel anything. While someone's action is the stimulus, your brain is the one filtering that event through your beliefs and memories to construct the emotional response.
Well, emotional agency means stepping back to respond with intention rather than just reacting on autopilot.
And the first application of agency here is Daniel Siegel's famous phrase, name it to tame it.
Naming the emotion is that crucial pause.
It is. You move past vague words like frustration or stress to acknowledge the sharp, raw anger, the underlying shame, or the deep sadness. Naming it signals to your brain that you are safe enough to observe the feeling. It activates the prefrontal cortex and moves you from reactive survival to thoughtful thriving.
And Dean's inquiry helped her shift her view of emotions from liabilities to expert guides.
She began asking herself, when does this anxiety spike? And she realized her anxiety spiked when she felt a loss of control over a professional outcome. Her sadness surfaced when she habitually neglected her own needs for the sake of others.
So she could understand the message of the emotion.
The message. And the reframing brought authenticity back into her relationships.
She shifted from seeing emotions as flaws to seeing them as data points.
Yes, which allowed her to model emotional honesty, even in difficult moments, like apologizing to her daughter and saying, I was mean to you just now because I'm genuinely tired and overwhelmed. I'm sorry.
That vulnerability creates a much deeper, more resilient connection than her previous attempts at perfect composure ever could.
Much deeper.
All right, now we anchor ourselves in the physical reality of the map with sensations and actions. The core idea here is that the body is a repository of wisdom. It provides signals that our intellect can't yet name or rationalize.
It's the essential somatic dimension. The body holds information that the mind often tries to bypass or intellectualize away. The author's work with Robin, the somatic body worker, was transformative for him.
Why was that?
Because it forced him, a man who was taught to control vulnerability through his intellect, to move beyond just thinking about his problems.
He had to stop intellectualizing the feeling and actually feel the physical manifestation. The tightness in his jaw, the knot in his stomach.
Exactly. Robin helped him realize that the physical sensation is the raw data. The jaw tightness is the message, which the mind then translates into the emotion of resistance or the thought, I don't agree. By learning to sit with the sensation, you interrupt the cycle before it escalates into full-blown emotional dysregulation.
The material highlights 3 key internal senses that are critical for achieving and maintaining thriving mode. Let's start with proprioception.
Proprioception is our body's internal compass. It's sensing your position, force, and movement without conscious effort. It's what allows you to walk down a dark hall without falling over.
And when we are stuck in chronic survival mode, that sense is often disrupted.
It is. We feel clumsy, ungrounded, or metaphorically off balance. Intentional movement like yoga or just simple breath work helps restore this fundamental sense of stability.
Second, we have interoception, which is often dubbed the sixth sense.
This is your ability to sense the body's internal physiological state, your heart rate, your internal temperature, hunger, the churn of your stomach. This sense is processed by the insula, a key brain region that really bridges the body and the mind.
So sharp interoceptive awareness allows us to catch the early, subtle physical signs of overwhelm.
Right, that slight quickening of the pulse. You catch it before it explodes into full-blown anxiety. This awareness is absolutely essential for regulating stress.
And the third sense is neuroception, a key concept from Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory.
Neuroception is our subconscious primitive threat detection system. It is constantly scanning the environment, looking at facial expressions, hearing vocal tones, sensing subtle body language for cues of safety or danger.
And it bypasses conscious thought.
Completely. It instantly triggers the fight, flight, or freeze responses, mobilization or immobilization, which activates the whole nervous system. You don't think about being safe. Your neuroception system decides if you're safe instantly.
And this framework leads us directly to the window of tolerance.
Dan Siegel's window of tolerance describes that optimal zone for calm, clear thinking, emotional processing, and social engagement. When we encounter stress, we get pushed outside this window,
Either into hyperarousal
which is anxious, overwhelmed, sympathetic nervous system overdrive,
or hyperarousal.
which is numb, disconnected, the parasympathetic freeze response.
It sounds like the goal is just to never leave the window.
No, and the author really stresses this. Real strength is flexibility, the ability to move between the sympathetic, mobilized, and parasympathetic or rest-digest states, and then return quickly to that balanced window.
He uses the analogy of the trees in the Biosphere 2 experiment.
Yes, the trees that collapsed because they lacked the wind resistance they needed to develop strong root systems and trunks. Resilience is developed by being challenged and then returning to center, not by avoiding stress entirely.
That flexibility is often governed by the second half of this element, actions, specifically our habits.
Habits are necessary life simplifiers. They reduce our mental load by making automatic what once required focus. However, habits formed in survival mode, things like stress snacking, doom scrolling, or drinking, often outlive their usefulness.
They provided a necessary off switch or temporary relief at one time.
But now they only serve to keep us stuck.
The author's sobriety journey is a really powerful example of an adaptive survival habit turning destructive.
Drinking had become his immediate off switch, a powerful chemical way to instantly regulate his overly activated nervous system. It eased the tension and anxiety accumulated from years of survival living.
And the turning point was when his young son,
Yes, his young son, sensing the shift in his father, asked the heartbreaking question, is Papa ever going to be himself again?
that question created the necessary jolt of awareness.
It did, and he used AR on the habit. The awareness was recognizing the urge to drink as a mechanism, a form of medicine to unwind. The inquiry asked, what is this habit truly costing me?
And the cost wasn't just physical, it was the cost to his identity as a father.
And the reframing required intentional substitution, like sparkling water in a wine glass, and critically shifting his self-identity.
Shifting from, I am trying to drink less
To, I am the kind of person who drinks less or who doesn't drink at all. The change had to be rooted in identity, not just in willpower.
The material also touches on his exploration of psychedelic-assisted therapy and his master's research.
Right, using psilocybin. He notes how it can interrupt those deeply grooved automatic neural loops, enhancing brain flexibility and allowing for radical belief change.
It sounds like a way to temporarily loosen the grip of the amygdala, to see things from a different perspective.
Precisely. For him, it helped transform his deep-seated fear of death into a more grounded mindfulness practice, which even included intentional cemetery walks to feel connected to the cycle of life. It allowed him to observe his relationship with alcohol from an objective distance, as a tool that had run its course.
But this path, it requires holding a profound paradox, self-acceptance, and a commitment to change at the exact same time.
This is the foundation of Marsha Linehan's dialectical behavior therapy. Acceptance honors the resourcefulness of the old habit. It was an adaptive strategy that helped you survive, while change commits to stepping into a new identity. Lasting transformation is rooted in honoring where you've been while choosing where you're going.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time grounding ourselves in those core internal elements, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and sensations and actions. But the map is 9 elements strong.
Right.
Which means we now have to expand our focus to the remaining 5, the dimensions of time and space that shape and influence our inner world. This is where the holistic nature of the framework really comes to life.
I think if the internal elements are the engine, then these remaining 5 are the environment, the fuel, and the history that dictates the engine's performance. They show how our internal world unfolds across all these different dimensions of experience.
Let's start with transcendence, the element in that final quadrant of the inner circle. This suggests that ultimate thriving requires looking beyond just the self.
It recognizes the deep human need for meaning, for connection, and for purpose that extends beyond our immediate self-interest or material gain. Transcendence is the experience of connecting to something vast, the cosmos, nature, faith, service.
Or pursuing eudaimonia.
Right, a life well-lived, rooted in meaning, which is different from hedonia, or just simple pleasure.
So how does this apply to someone who's trapped in survival mode?
Well, survival mode is inherently self-focused. It's about protecting me right now. Transcendence breaks that cycle by shifting your perspective. Look at Maria's story in the book. She was consumed by her own financial anxieties and professional burnout until she began volunteering at a local community shelter.
And what was the shift for her?
She found a profound connection and a perspective that transcended her daily fears. By reframing her personal suffering into an act of service, her anxieties didn't disappear, but they were contextualized. She moved from feeling isolated in her problems to feeling connected to a larger human endeavor.
Finding meaning-making in the act of giving.
Exactly.
Okay, next, let's address the elephant in the room. The past. Our history is constantly informing our present actions, whether we realize it or not.
The past, as Ronan's story illustrates, carries the invisible weight of our history, particularly our attachment patterns, early trauma, and our current emotional triggers. We are constantly reacting to the echoes of the past, often without realizing the source of the trigger.
So how does thriving engage with the past without just getting stuck in rumination?
Healing involves actively revisiting and reframing these stories. It's about shifting the narrative from one of shame or victimization to one of compassion and resourcefulness. Ronan realized his hypervigilance at work was a direct echo of having an unpredictable parent as a child.
So he was able to apply AR to his past.
Precisely. Awareness of the trigger, that sudden sense of panic when a superior was critical. Then inquiry asked, is this threat real or is this the 4-year-old me reacting to my father?
And the reframing.
The reframing meant consciously turning the past into a bridge, recognizing the lessons he learned, like resourcefulness and adaptation, rather than letting it be an anchor that dictates his current choices. It transforms old pain into wisdom that informs the present.
Then we have the present. We hear constantly about the importance of mindfulness, but this framework emphasizes that the present is the actual site where all transformation has to happen.
It is the point of power where agency is exercised. Lila's story highlighted this constant internal battle to just stay present. There's research from Harvard that shows a wandering mind is often an unhappy mind. It's constantly traveling to regret about the past or anxiety about the future.
And Lila, an overthinker, was missing moments with her children because she was mentally rehearsing conversations from the day before.
Exactly. So she used grounding techniques like breath work and engaging her senses, noticing the smell of her coffee, feeling the texture of her son's hair, to interrupt that mental time travel.
That seems like a real act of internal discipline.
It is. The paradox is that only by actively anchoring yourself in the now can you influence what comes next. Reclaiming the present means silencing that inner debate long enough to act with intention.
Okay, so if the past is the anchor, the future is a compass. This element is about actively constructing possibility, which the source calls prospection.
Prospection is our cognitive ability to simulate future scenarios, and it's essential for thriving. However, survival mode often turns prospection into fear, imagining all the ways things could go wrong. Thriving requires shaping the future through active, intentional planning.
And the case study here is Marco, the high-end chef.
Marco initially pursued a career in the ruthless fine dining world, which was driven by external validation, a survival strategy built on prestige and competition. He thought titles equaled safety.
His shift involved balancing hedonia, that immediate pleasure of a successful service, with eudaimonia, the deeper meaning from his craft.
Yes, he had to become skilled in optimism. Not naive optimism, but viewing setbacks as temporary, specific, and external, rather than permanent and personal. His reframing action was opening a smaller, less stressful restaurant that was focused on community and development. He chose meaning over status.
Finally, the largest sphere surrounding everything, space. This refers to our physical environment, our systems, our culture. This is often the hardest element to change, yet it influences all the others.
Space is everything that influences us outside of our skin. The lighting in a room, the clutter on a desk, the organizational culture, societal norms. Francisco, the CEO, was burnt out and trapped by his cluttered, stressful office and the pervasive corporate culture that glorified constant busyness.
So his physical and cultural space were contributing to his survival mode.
Actively. The physical clutter of his office translated to mental clutter and overwhelm. The cultural glorification of burnout meant he never took real time off. His awareness was recognizing that his environment was actively sabotaging his well-being.
And his agentic actions in reframing.
He took control of his space. He redesigned his office to be minimal and calming, physically removing distractions. But more profoundly, he changed his organizational space. He instituted a company-wide policy that weekends were for rest, and he publicly modeled this behavior. He evolved the culture from glorifying busyness to prioritizing sustainable well-being.
It is so clear from these 5 elements that thriving is a collective endeavor. It doesn't happen in isolation within the self.
Not at all. Individual shifts, like Emily setting boundaries, or Francisco redesigning his office space, create these vital ripples that can influence entire cultures and systems. Think of the collective effort required for the sugar boycotts during the abolitionist movement, or the collective declaration of worth during the civil rights movement.
These were collective habits and beliefs that changed entire societies.
They were. So this comprehensive map provides the tools for this dynamic spiral journey. It's back and forth, but the structure is there.
And the goal isn't achieving some perfect stress-free stasis or eliminating survival mode entirely.
No, survival mode is an essential function. The goal is to make thriving our baseline by consistently applying AR. Awareness, recognizing the mode, inquiry, questioning the story and its source, and reframing, choosing the intentional action that reflects your truest self. Hashtag outro.
This has been a phenomenal deep dive into complexity, covering all 9 elements: beliefs, thoughts, emotions, sensations, and actions, transcendence, past, present, future, and space. The constant companion throughout that entire spiral journey is that simple, powerful act of coming up for AR and engaging that space between stimulus and response. You have the agency to question the invisible scripts and the stories that keep you small.
And that agency is the ultimate source of security. As the author realized through his lifetime of tragedy and corporate success, the external sources of security we all chase, the titles, the wealth, the perfect composure, they can never provide the fundamental safety we truly seek.
He spent his corporate life believing that if he just climbed high enough and earned enough, he would finally be untouchable. He could control life's painful uncertainties.
But control is fundamentally an illusion, isn't it? Especially when you're in the face of life's inevitable, shattering moments, whether that's a sudden diagnosis, the loss of a loved one, or a complete career transition.
So the real, unshakable foundation for thriving is built from the inside out.
It has to be. It's built through the courage to look inward, to accept the wisdom of your emotions in your body, and to choose intention over automatic reaction. That is the only security that can withstand external chaos.
So we leave you with this final provocation to consider, based on the author's deepest late-life lesson. What is the single persistent story about safety and control that you are organizing your life around? A story perhaps inherited from your past or enforced by your culture that no longer serves you in your current environment.
And what small agentic step can you take today to begin the process of rewriting that story?